I want to talk to you today about this idea of empathy. And I am a cheesy strategy consultant kind of guy, but I want to talk to you about something that is something ordinary that we can all get. See, all of us understand this concept of empathy because every one of us is born with this God-given ability. And empathy is not sympathy. It's not feeling pity for someone. It's just the ability to step outside of ourselves and walk in someone else's shoes, to kind of intuitively get where someone else is coming from. And while we all get this as individuals, it's something that companies struggle with, and it's something that they seem to beat out systematically out of their organizations. And yet when I look at all of the firms that I've had the chance to work with, the biggest difference between organizations that were able to do amazing, great things and those that weren't was this idea of empathy, right? This kind of ordinary connection. And there are even some organizations out there that are able to take a sense of empathy for other people and distribute it widely throughout their organization, so that every single person in their organization gets a gut sense and an intuition for what keeps ordinary people up at night. Not just people in market research or marketing or something like that, but in IT and HR and finance and legal, where every single person has a sense of who really matters in the outside world. Take, for example, a place like Nike. If you ever get a chance to go visit Nike's campus in Beaverton, Oregon, it is an amazing place. I mean, the offices look like a college campus without all those boring classrooms. They just have, gyms and running tracks and workout rooms and swimming pools. And there's a track that goes around the entire outside of the offices. And any time of day that you go there, you can see folks out there running, Nike employees who are running, because most of these folks have been athletes since they were in the second grade, and at some point they realized they weren't going to get into the MBA, and so they needed to, get a real job, and so they work at Nike now. And as a result, everybody who works on a running shoe at Nike tends to be a runner themselves. And so if the market research sucks, guess what? The shoe ends up being pretty good nonetheless, right? Because they have that intuition and gut sense for what it's really like to play those sports. And this taps right into all of the stuff that Jeffrey spoke about earlier today, which is about not sitting in conference rooms and thinking about what the world is like, but taking those ideas out into the world where people are actually spending their time. Now, this is true not just at a place like Nike, it's true at places like Harley-Davidson as well, where Harley works overtime to connect with ordinary people who ride motorcycles. And that's what they call them. They call them riders, not customers, not consumers. Because as one Harley exec described it to me, she said, we call them riders because we are them and they are us. And we're not trying to sell to consumers, we're trying to serve riders. Because if we do right by them, we'll do right by everyone else in the process. And places that have this widespread sense of empathy look fundamentally different from the places that most of us end up working in. They tend to be places where we know things and we feel things in our gut before the rest of the world reads about it in the Wall Street Journal. And they have the courage to act on something and the passion to say, wow, we should take a risk on something new, even if it seems a little funny at first. And they'll stick with it even if it doesn't work out right the first time. And probably the most interesting thing that I've seen in these companies that have this widespread sense of empathy is that they spend a whole lot less time sitting in conference rooms arguing about stuff that would be patently obvious to you if you were spending time in the real world. And that's something that too many of us spend time doing, which is just arguing about the weather in a room which has no windows, rather than getting outside and actually connecting with ordinary people. Now, this is true not for all companies. I mean, there are some places that we found that had a high sense of empathy, and we saw places that had a low sense of empathy. And so my colleagues and I at Jump started to create this empathometer, where we started to, put up a metric system of high empathy companies and low empathy companies and companies that were in the middle. And I thought that at first I was, okay, companies that serve consumers would be high empathy, and companies that serve business to business would be low empathy, because that seems hard. But that wasn't the case at all, because we saw high empathy companies that serve businesses. And then we saw plenty of consumer companies who were managing by data, but had no intuition and gut sense for ordinary people. Take a place like Delta Airlines, for example. I remember getting into an argument with an executive at Delta. This was a few years back. He was arguing with me because he insisted that air travel in America is just great, and all of the dissatisfaction you hear is just media hype. I was stunned by this. The only conclusion I could make is that he didn't fly Delta Airlines, right? Because otherwise, why would you think that? But no, it turns out that the execs at Delta fly Delta Airlines. It just looks a little different than you or I. You see, their headquarters is in Atlanta, and it's right next to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, so they're right up against the airport. And when it's time for a Delta executive to get on a flight, they're all guys, right? He has his assistant call downstairs, and there's a shuttle bus that comes out right in front of the lobby, and he goes downstairs and he gets on this shuttle bus, and the bus drives up right into a hole in the fence. They have their own Delta security gate, and drives right up onto the tarmac where the planes are parked, and he climbs up through the jetway and goes and sits in first class. Right? So when he said that air travel on Delta was great, I had to agree with him. It was great for him, and it just sucked for the rest of us. Now, what was the cost of this? The cost of this was right at the time when we were having this conversation. There was a team at Delta Airlines that was spending over $200,000 on market research to prove to their own executives that air travel sucked. Right? That's a tremendous waste of time proving stuff that ought to be obvious to you if you're spending time in the real world. So I was puzzled by this, because I looked at this and I said, why is it if we are all wired to care, and that became the title of the book, if every one of us has the ability to connect with other people, what is going on that companies seem to kind of, unwire us or seem to snap that connection? Because I know we have this ability. I started talking to neuroscientists, and they would explain things to me about how empathy actually works. I mean, take this. This is a picture of your brain. Well, it's not your brain, but it's a brain. Your brain is probably quite similar to this. And if you were to look at a map of your brain, you would notice that there were kind of like broad brush stroke, three kind of different parts to it. There is the kind of core central part, what we call the limbic, or call the reptilian brain. And that's that part that's bolted onto your spinal column. That's the part that evolved first. It's the part that dinosaurs had, and alligators have, and iguanas have. It actually controls your heart rate and your breathing and your fight or flight response. And then there's this beautiful outer spongy layer, which is the part that is rational thought that human beings have, more sophisticated than anyone else. It's what allows us to kind of come and hang out at TED events and put up PowerPoint and talk to each other, right? But there's this thing in between, and it's called the limbic system. And it's where your emotions reside. And it's where your sense of other people reside. It's also where your memories reside. This is why if you have a emotionally strong experience, you are more likely to remember it, because those structures are next-door neighbors of each other, right? And this is something that human beings have, but so do all mammals. Cows have it and horses have it. And dogs and kitty cats have really well-designed limbic systems. They have the ability to empathize with other people. This is why if you've had a bad day at work, your dog knows that you've had a bad day. And he doesn't understand what a recession is, and he doesn't understand what traffic is like. He just knows that you feel bad, and he wants to make you feel better, because his limbic system is as sophisticated as yours or mine is. Right? Not so alligators and iguanas. They have no limbic system. They are all reptilian brain. And so iguanas tend to treat each other like furniture, right? They just kind of crawl over each other. They have no sense of another person. And they treat each other terribly. And it's not because they're immoral. It's because they're amoral. They have no limbic system. They are just in a system of fighting and flighting and eating and running. And the challenge is that when we look around the world, we see too many companies that can only be described as corporate iguanas, right? And it's not that they're immoral, it's that they're amoral. They're all just about kind of eating and running and moving on to the next thing. Right? So they behave like reptiles, right? Reptiles do these horrible things to each other. This is why when alligators are first born, they need to run like mad, lest their mommy alligator eat them, right? And that connection or that similarity to how corporations behave can only come from the fact that we are taking people who are thinking, feeling, empathic individuals and saying, you know what, check all that lovey-dovey crap at the door when you come in every day. Because we want to be fact-based in our decision-making, we want to be rational in our thinking, and because of that, we have encouraged people to say, you know what, it's just business, it's not personal. And I fear that as a result, we've created an entire generation of assistant marketing managers who believe that if they have 5 good bullets on a PowerPoint page, they understand their business. And they don't realize that their business isn't on that page, it's out in the world where people are living their lives and experiencing the lives of other people and ultimately buying products and services that we depend on. But if we could actually get back to that goal of saying, well, let's get back to something that's actually deeply emotional and deeply personal and start with a source of empathy, that's where the next opportunities are going to come from. And it's where we're actually going to get a sense of growth, not just in a business sense, but we might actually have something that companies struggle with every day, which is to give folks a reason to come into work every day. Thanks a lot. I think I'm out of time. Appreciate it.